Some places are meant to guide you safely home. Lighthouses, for example, standing tall against the storm, their beams cutting through darkness to warn sailors of danger. But what happens when the lighthouse itself becomes a trap? This is the story of the Greystone Lighthouse and the terrifying secret kept by its last keeper. In 1906, on the rocky coast of Maine, the small fishing town of Harbourside relied on the Greystone Lighthouse to keep ships from wrecking against jagged cliffs. Its light had guided sailors for decades, and the lighthouse keeper was considered a respected, if reclusive, member of the community. That keeper was Elias Granger, a man who arrived at the lighthouse as a young man and, by all accounts, never left. Elias was meticulous in his duties. The townspeople would occasionally see him climbing the spiral staircase, polishing the massive Fresnel lens, or keeping detailed logs in his worn journal. At first, he seemed like any other solitary lighthouse keeper, but after a stormy night in late October, strange stories began circulating in Harbourside. Fishermen returning from sea reported seeing lights where none should have been. Shadows moved along the cliffside, shaped like people, but impossibly tall. Some claimed that, late at night, a voice called out over the waves, Elias's voice, but distorted, echoing in a way that made listeners feel as if they were underwater. By winter, the town had begun to whisper of the haunting of Greystone. Locals reported that anyone who approached the lighthouse after dark would return hours later, dazed and confused, sometimes missing days from their memory. One boy disappeared entirely, only to be found months later wandering the shore, muttering about a light that never turned off. In truth, no one knew the full story, but it began with Elias himself. Elias was not like ordinary men. From the journals recovered after his death, it became clear he had discovered something unnatural in the lighthouse. In the lantern room, behind the massive Fresnel lens, he had found a hidden chamber. The entrance was small and easily overlooked, but inside strange symbols were etched into the walls. Candles burned perpetually, though there was no wind or draught. And at the center of the room sat a mirror. A tall, full-length mirror framed in tarnished brass that reflected not the lighthouse or the sea, but another world entirely. Elias became obsessed. He wrote of voices coming from the mirror, whispering secrets about the sea, about the stars, and about things far older than humanity. The mirror, he claimed, was a portal, but not to another land. It was a place between worlds, a space where reality itself bent and twisted. Objects thrown into it did not vanish. They simply ceased to exist in the physical world, their essence absorbed into the mirror. Over time, Elias's behavior changed. He stopped speaking to townspeople and refused all visitors. His journal entries became fragmented, alternating between lucid instructions for maintaining the lighthouse and frantic warnings to himself about the gaze that follows and the hunger behind the glass. By the spring of 1910, Elias had stopped logging his duties altogether. The townspeople tried to send help, but when they approached the lighthouse, the doors were locked. Peering through the windows, they saw him, standing at the top, staring into the lantern room, eyes wide and unblinking, as if the light itself had taken hold of his soul. Then he vanished. No body, no evidence. The lighthouse remained standing, its light shining faithfully at night, guiding ships along the coast. For years, rumors persisted that Elias had walked into the mirror itself, becoming part of whatever world lay beyond. Some fishermen swore that on foggy nights, the beam of the lighthouse would shift, pointing not to safety, but toward the open ocean, as if beckoning ships to follow a path that led nowhere. Curiosity got the better of several thrill-seekers over the decades. They climbed the cliffside, hoping to see the lighthouse from close range. Some claimed that when the beam swept across the rocks, it illuminated figures, not human, not entirely, but shapes that seemed to float, stretch, and melt back into shadow. Others returned with tales of whispers carried on the wind, promising secrets and knowledge, but at a price. The most chilling story came from a couple who rented a small cottage near the lighthouse in 1973. On their first night, they reported hearing knocking from inside the lighthouse. They assumed it was vandals, but the knocking continued for hours, moving from window to window, following them as they fled from room to room. When they finally dared to look out the window at dawn, The lighthouse was empty, but the lantern room from their vantage point seemed to glimmer unnaturally, almost as if something inside had been watching them all night. By the early 2000s, the Greystone Lighthouse was decommissioned, replaced by automated systems. The building was preserved as a historic site, but entry to the lantern room was prohibited. And yet, reports continued. Tourists and photographers captured fleeting shadows inside the room, or beams of light that appeared even during the day, moving in impossible patterns. Hikers along the cliffs swore they saw silhouettes, tall, faceless figures, standing just behind the windows, staring out to sea. What truly happened to Elias Granger may never be known. His journals were lost in a fire that consumed part of the Lighthouse Museum in 1964, leaving only fragments of his writing. The mirror itself is rumoured to have been removed, though no record exists of its whereabouts. Some claim it was destroyed, while others whisper that it was never a mirror at all, but a doorway. A trap, a doorway waiting for the next curious soul. Locals warn anyone venturing near Greystone, do not linger near the lantern room at night. Do not look too long at the light. The lighthouse remembers those who stare, those who listen, and those who step too close. For some places are not merely structures of stone and metal, they are alive, patient and hungry. There are stories of sailors who, caught in sudden storms near the cliffs, swear they saw a light that was impossibly bright, cutting through fog and darkness. They describe a shadowy figure standing at the top, though when they reached land, there was nothing. Ships that follow that light never arrive at port. Their cargoes are found later, floating near the rocks, empty of all life. And then there is the legend that has persisted for generations. If you're brave enough to climb the cliffs during a storm, and if you peer into the lantern room of the Greystone Lighthouse, you may see Elias, older than time itself, eyes unblinking, staring into your soul. Some say he beckons, inviting you to step inside, promising knowledge, power, or eternity. But once you cross that threshold, there is no return. Reality bends, and you, like those who came before, become part of the lighthouse forever, trapped in a world of shadow, mirrors, and eternal light. So the next time you see a lighthouse cutting through the night, consider this story. Lighthouses are meant to guide you safely home, but some are not guides at all. Some are traps, and some will wait, silently, for the next curious visitor to look too closely and vanish. Would you dare approach the Greystone Lighthouse on a stormy night? Or would you watch from a distance, knowing that some lights are better left alone?